एक्शन हो गया, ठीक है, चलो।
देख वेटर का नाम अक्षय कुमार है। तो
स्काई फोर्स।
हाँ
स्काई फोर्स। You want to introduce, Raj?
yeah good evening everybody.
Good evening.
Happy Republic Day, belated Happy Republic Day rather. We are very proud to be Indians and very glad that the constitution was enacted and it stays in this force, and that we can always live together and appreciate each other and appreciate India's diversity. Speaking of diversity, we have an interesting topic today because 2025 is a year of fairly relevant assembly elections in India. We have the Delhi assembly elections, we have the Bihar assembly elections. So, I think on that note, we just realized that it would be important to sort of take a deep dive or sort of probe into what the nature of identity politics is, because identity politics plays a fairly crucial role in the nature of electoral politics in general in today's day. A lot of the academia that has been published with respect to identity politics is something that we will try to evaluate over this conversation, and then see whether identity politics actually works, whether it sort of delivers real outcomes, real tangible policy outcomes in the ground. I mean, I think a crucial reason as to why we do so much politics is to change policy, right? If you don't agitate and speak, and if the real impact is not visible in policy matters, then what good is your politics? So the key agenda, if in one sentence I can explain what is with respect to this episode, then it's that we are today trying to probe whether identity politics actually works, and before that, what it actually is. I will bring my brother on board now, and Jay will give his thoughts.
What's up, guys? First of all, congratulations to India for being a republic for over 75 years now. No, for 75 years now. Exactly 75 years.
1950
Yeah,
में
75
no,
years.
हाँ
75
70
years. So
yeah
we've been a republic for 75 years now. We're still a young country and we have a fair share of problems. But after colonialism, I would still consider this as a major victory. And even though we are far from the dreams of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, but hopefully in the future we will achieve those dreams as well. Now, coming back to the first proposition that Raj talked about, that being identity politics. So मैं आज की कॉन्वर्सेशन थोड़ी सीरियस रखना चाहता हूँ, इसीलिए क्योंकि मेरे को लगता है कि जो आइडेंटिटी है वो एक बहुत ही कॉम्प्लिकेटेड कॉन्सेप्ट है. आइडेंटिटी काफ़ी तरह की होती हैं और काफ़ी चीज़ों से भी एसोसिएटेड हो सकती हैं. जैसे देयर कैन बी योर रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी, देयर कैन बी योर लिंग्विस्टिक आइडेंटिटी, देयर कैन बी योर एथनिक आइडेंटिटी, and on the basis of this you can basically decide the political future of a nation state as of now. Of course there were these identities in medieval times as well, before the quote unquote French Revolution, which I would say birthed the concept of the modern nation state that we see today. उससे पहले भी आइडेंटिटी का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल था, इंडिया में भी था. मगर अगर हम सिर्फ मॉडर्न टाइम्स को कंसिडर करें, एंड मॉडर्न टाइम्स का मेरा मतलब ये नहीं है कि हम कलोनियलिज्म की को भी इंक्लूड करें. मॉडर्न टाइम्स का मेरा ये मतलब है कि पोस्ट कोल्ड वॉर सेंस में अगर हम लोग आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स को देखें तो उसमें आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स का क्या रोल रहा है. बिकॉज आइडेंटिटी इज समथिंग विच इज़ सो, it is so sensitive. It has driven people to the most vicious acts against each other, and also driven people to do things which have innovated things and made the human experience a lot more comfortable. To give you an example, the the whole balkanization of southern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union is a very good example of where identity politics can lead to in a very bad, in a very bad sense. Whereas the understanding between, of course, whatever I'm saying is very generic. These are things which we read in our, in our 10th social studies, political science books, but it's something that we should remind each other of. And a good example of this is where there is a amicable solution between two parties which could actually go to war, and they decide that we should listen to the better senses on the negotiation table and ensure that nobody picks up arms. So it is a very, very slippery slope if we just let it snowball out of control, where we start othering each other out, for the lack of a better word, where we start holding the other party responsible for most of our problems and do not hold accountable our politicians. Then we would reach a point where we would kill each other, where we would dehumanize each other, and we would indulge in the most vicious acts that the human can ever think of. That is my introduction to the conversation.
Well, let's just look at the academic perspectives with respect to identity politics. There's a very standard set of definitions that sort of appear when you Google these terms, when you try to search and try to form your opinions about what identity politics exactly is. So it's just taking political positions based on your class identity, your racial identity, your ethnicity, your linguistics, and today's day, even your sexual identity, which plays such a crucial role now.
Gender identity
Your
as well.
gender identity, especially, for example, in the US electoral system, you see that the LGBT related issues are a very, very hotly debated electoral issue. So, at its core, the emphasis is always on driving political power for groups, many a times marginalized groups, through action and getting social justice and representation. There are some key academic perspectives. One is by an author, Kimberly Crenshaw, which is that her argument has always said that social identities intersect to sort of create overlapping systems of disadvantage and privilege. And then there are Nancy Fraser's redistribution versus recognition model, and there's Michael Dawson's Black Political Thought, which was basically an analysis of the political power and political movements of African Americans in the United States. So these are for the sort of nerdy ones who want to really go and search out the academic lens of identity politics. We are not experts, so we will not go down into the depths of it. But this is the large overview that we and most of us at some point find the quote unquote idea of identity politics fairly attractive, because after all we are human beings, we belong to communities, we belong to social groups, religious groups, linguistic groups, in India majorly caste groups, and therefore aligning each other in these political groups seems all that much more attractive to people like us. So there are legitimate criticisms to identity politics, mainly from the sort of libertarian view, which we many a times the sort of educated business oriented libertarian, for example in India, the sort of center right view.
Andre Bete was heavily critical
Yeah,
of the identity
yeah,
politics that was playing in the Indian subcontinent.
yeah,
In fact, he went on to criticize what you would call, quote unquote, the left, of saying that the institution of identity politics that they played with eventually backfired when a united Hindu identity was something which was politicized, specifically during the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, and it exploded with the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So this was a very
yeah.
important point that Andre Bete mentioned. Andre Bete is one of India's topmost sociologists. I really do recommend his writings.
Yeah, it's like the standard. It's everybody basically gives their own thoughts in what is Francis Fukuyama's take on identity politics, is that it basically fragments societies greatly. We saw that in the post Mandal anxiety ridden era, that you saw fragmentation heavily in the Indian society. There were protest movements, burning of buses, self-immolation, all of that. So that is
Literal insurgencies in Bihar.
yeah. So that is a sort of that is a sort of anxiety that persons have with identity politics, and to the sort of discredit of the advocates of identity politics, maximizing your social identities and strengthening your social identities, and weakening our respect for institutions, it does come with consequences. In India, we saw it with the post Mandal violence. In the US, we saw it in the George Floyd protests in 2020. We saw it in the 1992 protests in the US. Uh,
Rodney King
the
protest.
Rodney King protests. We saw it in India. In India,
That's so many times.
identity politics and violence. It has so many manifestations. It has the Thakur Brahmin rivalry, for example, in Eastern UP. It has the Bhumihar Yadav
Rivalry
rivalry in
in
Bihar.
it's the
Even
Hindu-Muslim rivalry in J&K or Uttar Pradesh.
yeah, even the left wing extremism
In Chhattisgarh.
in its own right
Yeah.
is a manifestation of
Yeah.
strong social identities.
Yeah.
So much so that you feel like the Indian state is not good enough to provide you social infrastructure, so you want to sort of overthrow it. And then its manifestation is also in the Tamil resistance of Hindi language
Tamil
or
resistance of Sinhalese
yeah, Sri
in Sri
Lanka.
Lanka. I think that's a
Yeah.
better example because I feel Hindi, in its pure sense, even though it has some bureaucratic relevance in the Indian state, but it wasn't imposed on the southern states like how Sinhalese was imposed on the northern Tamils. So I feel that is a very good example of language imposition if you want to talk about it, because that literally led to large scale violence, rioting, rape, and eventually plunged Sri Lanka into a 30-year-long civil war, which both the parties bared the brunt of, and obviously disproportionately the Tamils bared most of the violence. But I mean, that's what it leads to. Like, nobody wins in such scenarios. Everyone loses a loved one, and it's the politicians who make the most benefit.
Yeah, but okay, now to sort of counter that though, in defense of identity politics, I also do think that, for example, in the civil rights movement in the United States, or the first couple of waves of feminism, by the way, is such a hotly debated topic today. Jay and I feel like that's something we will reserve for another discussion, maybe with an expert on because it's
Yeah.
not exactly our field of expertise.
Yes.
But I do think that it's definitely a hotly debated political issue which borders along identity politics. So these are civil rights movement, feminism, they are aspects of identity politics which objectively have made people's lives better. So
Yeah.
it's not like identity
Of
politics
course.
is always all
Yeah, like
bad.
I feel Ambedkar's quest for Ambedkar's quest for making or ensuring the affirmative action for Dalits is also a very good example of where
Yeah.
identity politics has actually worked.
Yeah. Very much closer to home.
Again, we
And
cannot talk about that because we're not experts and we do not belong to that community. So we would like to get an expert to
yeah, these are
give us a
like
better expert
I think
opinion,
the
better opinion.
outcome of episodes where our conversation is so like across such a wide spectrum is that we can always keep noting down things we can do an episode on in the
Yeah.
future. But having said that, I think that there's a lot to do to be sort of defensive of identity politics as well. It has, for example, made people's lives better, and it has translated into political action as well. Even in the Black Lives Matter protests in the United States, there are very contested hot takes on it, and it's a provocative issue. But one thing that may be considered a positive outcome is that people deal with issues related to race a lot more sensitively. In India, caste identity, like Jay said, has been a huge factor, and that led to creation of many political parties which were targeted at upliftment of certain castes. Now, their performance, how they are doing, that is subject to another discussion. But definitely, welfareism came into action, and in maybe the early 90s where India didn't even have a private sector, the state was under a deep foreign reserve crisis. You needed voices that could sort of keep communities together and drive welfare. I don't know how successful they were, but at least it was coming into policy
And it
action.
wasn't like a Yugoslavia. Now, Yugoslavia is a very good example of where identity politics can actually go wrong. You had Josip Broz Tito, who was ruling over this massive country in southern Europe, and you can say that it was a country which was neither in favor of the Soviet Union nor was it in favor of the West. It was Josip Broz Tito was one of the founding members of the non-aligned movement. So because of that, he was able to establish a system in the country where Yugoslavia actually flourished a lot. In fact, Yugoslavia was seeing economic growth which was better than most of the Western European countries, and it was also establishing some good businesses, making its own cars. It was establishing free healthcare for its citizens. It was absolutely phenomenal. You can say that it was like a little communist utopia that was functioning in Southern Europe. Now, after Tito's death, a lot of economic mismanagement happened. Because of this economic mismanagement, a lot of debt was acquired, and the leaders which came after Tito just did not know how to deal with this debt. And once economic situations become really, really bad, nationalist forces tend to take a lot of power, and then they start to pitch one side against another, and the rest is history. I think we can do a Yugoslavia specific episode some
Yeah,
other
we
time, because
must.
I would like to say that I have done a lot of research on Yugoslavia. It's like one of my most I would say I'm like I'm not an expert, but I've read enough to at least have a good conversation
He's a
on Yugoslavia.
he's the in-house Balkans nerd.
Yeah, I'm the in-house Balkans nerd,
But
and anyway, but that is a very good example of how economic mismanagement
yeah,
can eventually lead to the rise of toxic. I would like
yeah.
to use the word toxic identity politics,
Hmm.
where a side is played against each other. And what happens a lot of times is that when there are less economic opportunities, you always want to look for some other person to be responsible for your misery, and that's when you start going to history.
Yeah.
Once you start going into history, and this is where Indians can learn from right now. Once you start going into history, it's like a rabbit's hole. There is no way you can come out of it. You will always find some example where you could say that this party was responsible for this atrocity that they committed on us, and then you would like to see yourself in a position where you might have a little more power than that particular party, and you would want them to feel the same way.
Yeah,
So
I think to the discredit of identity
yeah,
politics, it's a very tempting line of thought because it's a very convenient way to evade
of course.
accountability also. That a certain policy action misdirected by a certain political party, and I do this myself in the case of Bihar, so I'm not trying to blame anybody,
Mhm.
but a certain political action by a certain political party is why we lost out on welfare.
Mm,
So maybe politics also failed you,
absolutely.
but also there must be accountability of the parts where you failed yourself, and that we fail to account for when we get obsessed with identity politics.
Absolutely. To give you an example from Yugoslavia again, right? And we can very well map this out in our own country as well. So in 1389, there was a battle which happened between the Orthodox Serbs and the Ottomans. It was called the Battle of Kosovo. Kosovo means the field of blackbirds, where the Serbs lost. But apparently, they gave such a good fight to the Ottomans that their movement inside Western Europe was stopped at the southern tip, and it is considered to be one of the most legendary battles that was fought by the Serbs. It was their Maharana Pratap moment, for the lack of a better analogy. And in 1989, when Yugoslavia is still communist, mind you, you must have heard of the dictator Slobodan Milosevic. He was on the tongues of a lot of people from late 80s till the early 2000s. He was considered to be like the big bully of Eastern Europe around that time. Slobodan Milosevic, in a communist country, organized this massive rally for the 500-year celebration of Battle of Kosovo, which is said to be the defining moment, which literally put a lot of other ethnicities in Yugoslavia be extremely insecure of their future, and made them think that okay, now this country is heading towards a pro-Serbian existence. And mind you, Serbs were the dominant community, but they only had 31% of the population, and the entire state collapsed. And you know what the size of Serbia is today. Food for thought.
Yeah, I think that see there's a huge positive component to the identity based welfareism in so many parts of the world. There's the tribal communities in Australia, in Canada, who've been able to speak about their welfare issues. We hear about the Native American struggles, and this is, by the way, I get the settler perspective sometimes. So I always say that when you start speaking about the indigenous communities, we can start with the premise that nobody's nobody is here to apologize or leave your indigenous lands, but you can sort of acknowledge historical injustice. You can meet an agreement, and you can have enough social representation, and that's the only way to sort of realistically move forward with
Absolutely.
governance. I don't think that to the discredit of social media, these issues become so much more difficult to debate because it's so much easier to clip you out of context, and the real policy impact and the real discussions often miss the right ears they should be falling on. Now, even there has sort of been a global rise in extremely populist, inward-looking movements, and I think that is again to the discredit of how the implementation of policy action based off of identity politics has come. I don't think that the standard Republican in the United States has been against legal immigration. They have never been against, for example, the issues related to welfare of minorities. But the way it's implemented, the way it's fed down to you, the way the average person sometimes didn't feel involved in the policy action, that I think frustrates the average middle class voter. And then the consequence of that are like these sort of alpha male macho inward looking center right or far right leaders that are coming around the world. And let's just understand that they have a legitimate perspective that needs to be heard out. I myself am a big fan, and this is going to cause our followers some confusion, of Javier Milei, the new Argentinian head of state. He's a very articulate man. He was a superstar at the World Economic Forum, and his voice is the direct action or the direct response for like years of welfareism, years of socialized risk, years of like this elitist policy bureaucracy, that the committee class of sorts that needed a pushback. And Javier Milei came into power and instantly cut his government into half. And he's such a old school libertarian that this is the kind of politics that has started coming in. This is also an outcome of identity politics somewhere. The real welfare impact will have to be studied later. But the rise of these individuals has also come in after years and years of identity politics, and that has caused frustration and a lot of isolation many times to the communities that were very high tax paying. They wanted to be involved in governance and were not for various reasons. Jay, sorry for my
Yeah,
long
I
monologue.
totally agree with you, because what happens is that if you leave out a chunk of people from governance, from a lot of other opportunities, or from the circles of power, it really creates a lot of resentment, and it eventually leads to violence. And then again, it is a field which can, be grazed for forever, because what happens is that then the conversation does not end there. Then there will be this argument that, okay, this particular group has, say group A, right? I'm not going to take names. Group A has, say, 60% population in a particular state, and group B has 40% of the population, or say 25% of the population. But group B, because of historical reasons, has been more educated, has been wealthier, so they enjoy most of the corridors of power, right? Even after affirmative action, even after affirmative action, they are at the top positions, be it the government, be it the private sector. Now, in order to solve that disparity, specifically looking at group A, the 60% of the population, what do you want to do? Do you want to enhance affirmative action at places of power so that they get a voice, so that their population is not pushed to such an extent that they're forced to, say, pick up arms or hit the streets or indulge in violence? Or there should be some negotiation where there is an understanding that, hey, these are the areas which are open for you, why don't you come and grab it, and let's see what happens after that. So, Nick, what is your take on that?
I agree with you. I I I, I mean, my take is very simple. Let's just look at identity politics as a tool to drive change and to drive social reform. And when you see it being partially effective, you have to see that there are many shortcomings to it. It's not driving welfareism like it had to. I want to go back to what we were talking about with the world leaders coming out in a much more radical stance against wokeism. You have these tech oligarchs also coming out against wokeism. So these are all indications to me that at some level identity politics, despite despite its successes, now is something that is not finding enough steam.
Yeah.
Even in the Indian context, slowly, despite having earlier won the support of the downtrodden communities, communist parties are nearly finished. Welfareism and the povertarianism concept of the Indian middle class has been largely crowded out.
Absolutely.
More people want to, for example, identify as the Ambanis or be like them rather than hate them. So we need to understand that political identities and social identities will also stop being effective in driving social change after a point.
Yeah, to add to what you're saying, I saw something very interesting yesterday. I was in GK2, one of the most prime locations of Delhi and in India, I would say. And there, a very obscure political party, I didn't even notice their political symbol. They were taking out a rally in favor of the Republic Day. And the funny part is that most of the cars were luxury cars. I saw Bentleys, I saw a Range Rover, I saw a Mercedes, and that hit me for a second, because I was like, we have reached that level of capitalism in our country that even to tell the world that okay, we're reaching that that aspired levels of greatness, even such small political parties can come in rallies with such expensive and swanky cars. I don't know what the messaging was, but it was definitely a fascinating sight for me.
नो इट्स लाइक वो कहा जाता है ना कि एक ज़माने में एक गांव का सरपंच की इमेज आपके दिमाग में आती होगी कि एक बहुत बूढ़ा लाठी लेके गांव का लीडर है, मगर आज तो रूरल इंडिया में पंचायत लेवल पॉलिटिक्स पे भी लगभग लोग इनोवा क्रिस्टा जैसी गाड़ियों में घूमते हैं.
भाई हमारे
You know,
गांव
अब
में लोग
access-
ड्रोन वोन लगाने लग गए,
हाँ.
ड्रोन चलने लग गए.
तो एक्सेस भी बढ़ा है, इनकम लेवल्स भी ऊपर आए हैं, और एज अ रिजल्ट ये एक्चुअली आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स का कॉन्सिक्वेंस ये भी है कि आप गवर्नमेंट वेलफेयरिज्म पे बहुत रिलाई करने लगते हो, और ये एक इंडियन साइकी का एक इंडिकेशन है दैट आर इनकम्स आर इंक्रीजिंग, सो वी वांट टू सॉर्ट ऑफ गेट आउट ऑफ द वेलफेयरिज्म, एंड दैट इज व्हाई द सॉर्ट ऑफ the emerging middle class is the most frustrated with a heavy taxation, absent infrastructure, and poor social infrastructure, and caste and identity based politics, because this is a large segment of the demographic which has sort of come out many times from hard work through doing government service or to getting a job in the private sector or through doing business, and now it frustrates mostly the sort of hard working sections of the economy to see people expecting government transfers, expecting higher welfare expenditures, because that is not the right way to get welfareism for many persons. I am not against social infrastructure expenditure, but after a point you need to see heavy expenditure on welfareism is not as effective in upliftment as is you just need to focus on institution building, and if the government sort of takes a back seat in heavy welfareism expenditure, it will achieve the opposite of what people think it will
That's
do.
why I keep coming on Kerala. That's why I keep giving Kerala's example, is because there I feel the communist government, even the Congress government, anyone that's been involved in Kerala, they have made their institutions they have organized their institutions in such a way that automatically the population is uplifted. So even though there are less economic opportunities in Kerala, but the primary schools are very good, the secondary schools are very good, they're much better as compared to other parts of the country, specifically North India. The healthcare system is so good, the sewage disposal is so good, garbage disposal is so much better, inland waterways are so much better. So there are things which the government can actually focus on, which only have to do with institutionalization, as
Yeah.
you said, and not just doling out welfare programs.
Yeah.
You can do welfare programs as well, but first focus on your rudimentary institutions. If they start working perfectly, then the other things can also fall in place.
Yeah, I mean, to the discredit of government of India, regardless of political parties, I think what people always assume is that direct benefit transfers are what will drive welfareism, and that is a totally wrong line of thought. It is only a focus on positive building of social infrastructure that builds institutions. You do good primary schooling, you build better hospitals, inland waterways, land ports, and better transport infrastructure that we have done recently, and then you see automatically the need for welfareism will go away.
Of course.
The entire fiscal burden of welfareism should not be looming down the government of India when policy making should be priority. And I mean, it's a contested take, it's a hot take, it'll take time to officiate in process. But I think it's something we need to seriously start deliberating now.
Absolutely. So, I don't know how appropriate this particular example is, but you must have heard about the Ayushman scheme, right? The Ayushman Bharat scheme. You have any idea about it?
Of course,
So, what do you know about the Ayushman Bharat
it's
scheme?
health insurance.
Health insurance in what sense? Are they provided? Are the people taking up Ayushman Bharat scheme from a particular strata?
I mean, I would like to believe so.
Yes.
I'm again, I have not conducted any
Yes,
studies
but
myself.
from what I've heard is that they provided a card,
Yeah,
an ATM
Abha
card.
card होता
Abha
है,
card.
Abha card होता है.
It's a card,
हाँ,
right?
आपका एक account बनता है and then you get an Abha
So
card.
from that Abha card, you can go to different dispensaries and buy medicines,
Yeah, and
right?
get free treatment
get
also.
free treatment as well.
Yeah.
So like, that's the thing, like does this make it a direct benefit transfer?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
This is, I definitely think that I get what you're coming from. I think in the larger scheme of things, I would like health insurance also to be done privately. But the private sector doesn't have a very good system of claims redressal, which is why we saw the New York incident. So it's internationally the private sector in insurance. India does a better job, by the way. Some major insurance providers like United Health and all, they have very good claims numbers. The one incident that happened in the US with that Luigi Mangione, he shot the insurance CEO. So I like to think that this is health insurance is an area where I don't even mind the government being present and providing health insurance to say really marginalized sections because they have a higher chance of getting into
Of course.
serious accidents.
But it
Many of
is a-
them will engage in manual
I
labor.
totally
It
get
can
it.
cause health risks.
But it is a type of a benefit transfer, right? Let's agree to that.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean, let's look at it like this: if you were buying premium for an insurance policy and that was being paid for by the government,
Yeah.
it's almost like
A
that.
benefit transfer,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
I just saw a meme where, like you said, like sometimes these benefit transfers are not very effective. I saw this meme. I don't know how true it is, but maybe somebody must have thought about it. So sometimes these benefit transfers can also be misused.
I mean, yeah. See, listen, I'm not going to comment on that.
But,
But, yeah,
like the meme said that with my Ayushman Bharat card, I went to the medicine shop and bought some Viagra. I don't know how accurate this is, but my whole
No,
point
it's funny.
was
No.
yeah. So I mean, I think we're digressing.
But no, yeah, you're right.
Right, so there is a strong possibility of direct benefit transfers being misused.
No, I actually remember when I was a university student, I was interning at the Niti Aayog, and I remember a girl from Bombay who, unlike us, we were very comfortable in Niti Aayog because we were officers' children. Let's be real. And this girl was very uncomfortable working there because she thought that this is such a lax environment. They don't actually need interns. What even is policy, think tank, academia in India when everybody is just doing research, afsar logon ki licensing, all that. That's how it worked, at least at that time. So she one day very frustrated threw a document and she was like, is this the right way to induce people to go into institutionalized childcare services? Because I remember one of the schemes was a proposal to just it was a part of I think Beti Bachao Beti Padhao in Rajasthan. So one of it was just basically handing people rupees 500 for an institutionalized child delivery. कि आप बच्चा हॉस्पिटल में पैदा करो उसके लिए हम आपको पैसे देंगे. So her take, I understood her frustration that is this even the right way to get somebody to come to a hospital for childbirth? You could actually get really sick or die, but oh, you are being offered 500 rupees, so you come and deliver your baby in the hospital. But that's the scale of poverty, and that's the outcome also of too much welfareism. That even from
That's where I come from.
the policy mindset becomes so focused on handing people crutches. Even right now, I was reading an article about the Delhi elections, and the entire conversation was about free bus rides, free medical treatments, free metro rides for women, which was proposed by the Delhi government, but the DMRC used to heavily oppose it. So there is no there is no revenue prudence behind these
Absolutely.
schemes. A and B, these schemes will make you
बोलते रहे,
so
बोलते रहे.
lazy about like your policy thought process कि आपको इसके बजाय कुछ और सोचेगा नहीं. So that's where I like to end, that now social infrastructure and physical infrastructure must be spent on, but we need to get out of this mindset of handing people crutches, and there is no novelty in another assembly election which is just focused on welfareism sort of expenditure. And इसका outcome ये होता है कि आधे समय तो आप old pension scheme और new pension scheme, ओल्ड पेंशन स्कीम न्यू पेंशन स्कीम आर्ग्यू करते रहते हो. अभी पेंशन से पहले आज का क्या, स्टार्टअप इंडिया का क्या, हैंडीक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्री का क्या, इनलैंड वाटरवेज का क्या, डिफेंस रिफॉर्म्स का क्या. एनीवे सॉरी.
नहीं नहीं, एयरफोर्स इक्विपमेंट का क्या, सिर्फ रफेल डालने से थोड़ी होता है. Anyway, so to conclude, I would say that identity politics has its pros and cons, like mostly a lot of things. But identity politics, if it leads to othering of minorities, if it leads to othering of oppressed groups, if it leads to rise of jingoism and fascism, if it leads to violence, civil war, that type of identity politics is bad. Identity politics which segregates and isolates a particular community is bad. Be it any community, and that's why one scene from that movie, what was that movie which was depicting Nelson Mandela's life and that rugby match, Invictus, right? So basically,
I'm the master of my fate.
yeah, so
the
basically, a
captain
lot
of
of
my
people, a
soul.
lot of white people were very, very scared when Nelson Mandela took power, and they were like, "Okay, we're going to witness the same type of violence that we were in. We were putting on the black masses." But Nelson Mandela took the higher ground and said that no, now you're also citizens of this country. So
That's how you make a world leader.
that's how you make a world leader, and that's why people respect Mahatma Gandhi so much. I mean, of course, there are a lot of imperfections of that to that man as well, but there are certain things that he said which were right. That's why people respect people like B.R. Ambedkar so much. So it is very, very important that we keep that in mind. And thank you so much.
I just
Thank
have
you,
my
Jagan.
last take.
Yeah.
Like, historically, we've seen, like the example we gave about the indigenous communities of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, we've seen caste dynamics improve in India with identity politics, the feminist movement around the world. So, there are legitimate, tangible policy action improvements through identity politics, but it cannot be your way to sustain governance. You cannot keep exploiting identity politics at every election, and you cannot keep sustaining yourself on welfarist and povertarianist expenditures. You must reform and start investing on infrastructure and start trusting each communities, lower the fragmentation after a point. So there is a limit to what identity politics
Absolutely.
can achieve. That is our take.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. I have also given my concluding thoughts, and I think we're gonna We're gonna be dropping 2 episodes this week, so be ready.
Stay tuned.
Lot of things coming your way, and also we've hit 500 subscribers. Thank you so much. We started this venture almost 11 months ago,
Yeah.
and it's picking up,
So,
and hopefully
let's hope the next 500 come very soon.
very soon. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Mwah.
अच्छा episode